Raymond Carver's last book, A New Path to the Waterfall, is published this month. Carver died of lung cancer in 1988. At the time of his death, he was one of the most admired writers in America. His success was all the more remarkable because only 10 years earlier, Carver was a burnt-out case, alcoholic and bankrupt, his first marriage in ruins, uncertain, in fact, that he would ever write again. But from these experiences, he distilled a singular literary landscape peopled with the debris of the American dream. The sparseness of his style echoing the muffled anguish beneath the surface of small-town America.
She finds a job. She starts working as a waitress in a diner a few blocks from here. She works a split shift, doing lunches and then going home, and then back to work again in time for the dinner shift. She's meeting herself coming and going. The boys swim all day while her husband sits inside the apartment. I don't know what he does in there. Once I did her hair and she told me a few things. She told me she did waitressing when she was out of high school, and that's where she met her husband. She served him some pancakes in the place back in Minnesota. She sits there, waiting. My life is gonna change. I feel it, she says.
That life and those people whom I knew so intimately made a very large and profound impression on my emotional life. So I still find myself going back to that time, no matter how much my circumstances might change. I still tend to go back to that time. If I have any strength and things that really make a claim on my heart's affections, it is with those people.
Nobody's ever written about these people, or at least nobody in years in America has written about these people who lived in trailer parks and drank gin at the kitchen table and worked as janitors or lumberjacks. It was extraordinary the way in which he made legitimate a kind of social and economic terrain that had not been seen in fiction in years.
People who are living on the edge and who are trying to do the best that they possibly can in this life make decisions which they hope will be for the best, but oftentimes the best they can do is not good enough for some reason or another, and they have to find a way to come to terms with certain things, with their own mortality, with their own limitations and the limitations of others. My sympathies are with these people who have had the bottom fall out of things. I've known these people. I grew up with them.
I think for writers, what you do is you use your past up. And so for writers, your past stays with you as long as you can, as long as you have some use for it. And you know, Ray's ongoing work documented his relationship to his past all the time. Not that he wrote autobiography, because he indeed did not, but for those people who knew him intimately, from time to time you'd see things that he had told you or things that you knew about turn up in a story, a line here or a reference there. He just used his past like all writers do.
This is a story called Nobody Said Anything. I could hear them out in the kitchen. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they were arguing. Then it got quiet and she started to cry. Later I heard Dad leave to catch his bus. He slammed the front door. She had told me before he wanted to tear up the family. I didn't want to listen. After a while she came to call us for school. Her voice sounded funny. I don't know. I said I felt sick at my stomach. It was the first week in October and I hadn't missed any school yet, so what could she say? She looked at me, but it was like she was thinking of something else. All right. She shook her head. I just don't know. Stay home then, but no TV, remember that. When she started to get ready for work, I asked if she would make a bed for me on the couch. I said I wanted to study. On the coffee table I had the Edgar Rice Burroughs books I had gotten for my birthday and my social studies book, but I didn't feel like reading. I wanted her to leave so I could watch TV. She flushed the toilet. I couldn't wait any longer. I turned the picture on without the volume. I went out to the kitchen where she had left her pack of weeds and shook out 3. I put them in the cupboard and went back to the couch and started reading The Princess of Mars. She came out and glanced at the TV but didn't say anything. I had the book open. She poked at her hair in front of the mirror and then went into the kitchen. I looked back at the book when she came out. I'm late. Goodbye, sweetheart. She wasn't going to bring up the TV. Last night she'd said she wouldn't know what it meant anymore to go to work without being stirred up. You take that medicine, sweetheart, and I hope your stomach feels better by tonight. Maybe we'll all feel better by tonight. She stood in the doorway and turned the knob. She looked as if she wanted to say something else. Bye, Mom. My father came out from Arkansas looking for work, and after he found work on Grand Coulee Dam in 1936, and he went back to Arkansas, married my mother, and brought my mother and his parents out to Washington. Washington State, probably half the population comes from Missouri and Oklahoma and Arkansas.
We all came together looking for work in Washington in the 20s, 29, and there was no work hardly in Arkansas, and there was work out here, and it was during the Depression, so.
Three-car load. Raymond Sr. wasn't married, and he had a 26 model Ford, Model T. And there was a feller came with us in one car with an old Star, about 26 model Star. And some friends of ours that we rode in the car with, we had our youngest son was on the month old when we left Arkansas, and we nursed him on the pillar all the way out. And we were in the 26 AAA, 3 cars. It was 14 days on the road. You didn't have any pavement on that place. You'd hit pavement would be through the towns, good-sized towns. Then it was gravel road, you know how they bounce around, so that's why we were so late about coming. And we all went to work for Biles Coleman Lumber Company.
Ray's father would tell us some weird stories at times, just what he used to do and about playing ball, and just lots of different things. I just can't think now, just a lot of things, and fishing. And they do enjoy storytelling. And then I used to read to them a lot. I'd go to bed in the afternoon and read to Ray, and he'd lay there and listen. Read it again, Mom.
The kids had quite a time when they were growing up, you know. But, well, they had jobs and got by all right, but I mean, they didn't have an awful lot of money. They lived out the kind of the back of our orchard, and she would send him up to stay a few hours, and she'd pin a little note on him and tell me when to send him home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't think he'd ever amount to anything. But he did. We was proud of him.
I knew someday he'd strike it rich because he was too much of a smart boy, you know, to let his talent get away like that. Because he was smart from the beginning when he was a little fellow.
Did Ray Jr. get on with his father?
Oh, yes, he did for it. You know, after my husband passed away, Ray just couldn't very well mention his father. He loved him so much till, you know, because he was so good to my boys. He just loved, he said Ray was just his right arm. He was a good provider and worked every day. On weekends, he liked to fish and hunt, but his beer drinking and such as that, you know, kind of, well, other people you couldn't tell I had had a glass of beer, but my husband, I could. And I used to pour liquor out and water it and everything like that. For I never was a drinker. I can have a social drink at times, but I'm just not a drinker. And I couldn't tolerate it like that, so he came in one day kind of late. He didn't step out on me, anything like that, but yet I was so mad. I picked up that colander that pushes the tomatoes down in a basket, and I hit him with that. It bled. Of course, like scared the boys to death, and he got all right.
Photograph of my father in his 22nd year. October. Here in this dank, unfamiliar kitchen, I study my father's embarrassed young man's face. Sheepish grin. He holds in one hand a string of spiny yellow perch, in the other a bottle of Carlsbad beer. In jeans and denim shirt, he leans against the front fender of a 1934 Ford. He would like to pose, bluff and hearty for his posterity, wear his old hat cocked over his ear. All his life my father wanted to be bold. But the eyes give him away, and the hands that limply offer the string of dead perch and the bottle of beer. Father, I love you, yet how can I say thank you? I who can't hold my liquor either, and don't even know the places to fish.
He worked in the sawmill. He worked in the sawmill all of his life, and he died when he came home from a shift late at night, and went to bed and didn't wake up.
This is Lindy's on South First Street in downtown Yakima, and during our high school years from 54 through 56, Ray and I spent a lot of time here, not only eating cheeseburgers and drinking Pepsi, but playing the pinball machines here, which we had down to an art form at that particular time. I think we probably lost enough to pay for this building 2 or 3 times over, but we had a good time in high school.
What was Ray like in those days? I mean, did you ever think he was going to be a famous writer?
He wanted it. I wasn't aware that he really wanted it until he was probably a junior in high school and sent away for a famous writer's correspondence course or something. It cost $25 or something. And Ray shared one of his assignments with me one night. And one of the lines was, "The gun was hotter than a 2-bit muffler on a Saturday night." And I thought to myself, wow, that's bad. He'll never make it. We both had big dreams, and Ray did marvelous. I'm so proud of what he did. Finally, Ray found Mary Ann, And I found a girl named Judy, and it seems like our friendship sort of split from there on.
I was expected to go to work in the sawmill where my dad worked, and something else was expected of my wife. She was expected to stay home and take care of the children, and both of us had other notions. We were ambitious.
She's a real live dog. I don't know at what age he decided to write, but at that age he was committed to be a writer. And when he said that to most people in Yakima, they scoffed at that and laughed, because we didn't know many people that dared to say, I want to be a writer. They would have said, I want to be a school teacher, and I hope I get to write a few things on the side, or whatever. They'd have had to toss in that realism, you know. But Ray said, I want to be a writer, and no apologies for it. And she showed me some poetry he'd written before he showed me anything, in fact. And I said, well, Mary Ann, no 16-year-old wrote that. They just don't have those kinds of experiences. Or, you know, his folks were from Arkansas. I knew they had not been around. They weren't, you know, that just wasn't part of his world, his growing up world, I didn't think. The things he was writing at that time, you know, about relationships between men and women in their 30s and 40s, and it just didn't seem to have come from his pen. But she said, well, he certainly did. And what I discovered about that over the years was his writing didn't change. He was kind of ageless then, and he stayed that way.
Lost it. He didn't even say goodbye to me. He just hung up. He was laughing so hard. And then he told Auntie Rosie and then what happened. And everybody was laughing, so the next day, here comes Norman Brown.
Once when I was in high school, a counselor asked me to come to her office. She did it with all the girls, one of us at a time. What dreams do you have? This woman asked me. What do you see yourself doing in 10 years? 20 years? I was 16 or 17. I was just a kid. I couldn't think what to answer. I just sat there like a lump. This counselor was about the age I am now. I thought she was old. She's old, I said to myself. I knew her life was half over. And I felt like I knew something she didn't. Something she'd never know. A secret. Something nobody's supposed to know or ever talk about. So I stayed quiet. I just shook my head. She must have written me off as a dope. But I couldn't say anything. You know what I mean? I thought I knew things she couldn't guess at. Now, if anybody asked me that question again about my dreams and all, I'd tell them. What would you tell them, honey? I have her other hand now. But I'm not doing her nails. I'm just holding it, waiting to hear. I'd say dreams, you know, are what you wake up from. That's what I'd say. She smooths the lap of her skirt. If anybody asked, that's what I'd say. But they won't ask.
Wake back up and I go and steal his beer, and they had a phone call, right? He wouldn't wake up, so I go, Norman, Norman. And I go like this, and
My wife and I were married early on. She was 16, I was 18. By the time she was 18 and I was 20, we had 2 children. We had no skills. We had no money. Her family was in desperate straits. My family was in desperate straits. In fact, we've sometimes found ourselves giving them food and shelter, literally. We found ourselves growing up with our children. At the same time, I was working a job. My wife was working a job. I was trying to go to school, to go to college. I was trying to learn to write. And I needed to start something and finish something, most often in one sitting. And when I didn't have time to work on short stories, I wrote poetry. I think I wanted to write novels, but I didn't have time to write. I couldn't seem to be clear to write a novel, so I'd write short stories. It was not an easy or entirely pleasant situation, except I must say, for the first, for the 10 years, the first 10 years or so, we had a lot of hope and idealism and a lot of strength, and we thought that if we worked hard, and did the right things, the right things would happen. Things would work out. This is not just the American dream. I think this is something that's common to us all. Well, as it turned out, we did the best we could, and we worked as hard as we possibly could. And things did not turn out. There was never enough money to go around at the end of the month. And finally, that kind of wild endeavor and that effort began to wear us down. And things happened. And then it was, and the children began to hit their adolescence, and they hit their stride, and it was not exactly entirely pleasant.
Where Marianne and Ray had never exchanged any crosswords over the importance of what he was doing, the kids would speak up about that, you know. We need a new bicycle, or we need this, or I want the car keys, or whatever. And Ray could handle those babies just fine, but he couldn't handle these big intruders that could bust right in the middle of a story, and that he was trying to get out by the next day and create some sort of a crisis for him. And it was the teenage business as much as anything else. And in frustration, if he couldn't finish or got off on a wild goose chase rescuing his daughter's dog, or, you know, fixing his son's bike or something, when he got through, he'd just get a bottle, you know, and drink. But just, you know, it did get to be impossible to live together without some kind of chaos coming down, and I think they were tired of it.
My name's Stephen. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi,
Hi. Welcome, Betty. Yeah, what it was like before. I started drinking in high school, and helped me to deal with the trauma of growing up. And after I got out of school, it seemed to help me with everything, and I pretty much used that for a cure-all.
I was a bar drinker.
World War III all the time.
I was always out at the bar, never alone, because most I couldn't stand my own company. I knew I was an alcoholic from very early on. I can remember sitting in saloons in Los Angeles, and I'd say, you know, honey, I'm an alcoholic, and I've got to be really careful how I handle this stuff.
Out of the woodwork. You know, I remember one night picking a fight with him. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and that was my story. I liked to fight when I drank, and it was this Jekyll and Hyde personality that would come out. You know, when I was sober,
and I woke up the next
prim and proper.
thing I remember, I woke up and it was just getting daylight. And I looked up and there I was laying in the basement of this half torn down building. I mean, I looked up, I saw boards laying sideways, looked like it'd been bombed or something. Boards laying sideways, and the stairwell, all there was a stairwell and the stairs and no walls. And I woke up and I didn't know what town I was in. I mean, I thought maybe it'd been bombed when I passed out. I didn't know for sure where I was. I was scared. I was kind of scared.
I used to like to drink a lot.
I was scared because I didn't know where I was and what happened to the building I was sleeping in. I wasn't even sure if I was in Seattle. I was, but I just wasn't. Nothing looked familiar to me.
I was never into the myths or the mythos of alcohol and the artist at all. I was just into the alcohol itself. I liked the taste of it. But I never from the beginning connected this up with the fact of wanting to be a writer, or the fact that alcohol would help you write. No, I was into the thing itself. and I didn't connect this up with the myth of the writer as the alcoholic, no, or as a heavy drinker, I should say. Because for such a long time, of course, alcoholism was a strange strange and horrible word. It was something that happened to people who slept on park benches and hung around in the Bowery and things like this. Alcoholism did not hit decent, hardworking, God-fearing people.
In the kitchen, he poured another drink and looked at the bedroom suite in his front yard. Things looked much the same as they had in the bedroom. Nightstand and reading lamp on her side. His side. Her side. He considered this as he sipped his whiskey. Now and then a car slowed and people stared, but no one stopped. It occurred to him that he wouldn't either.
It must be a yard sale.
Let's see what they want for that bed.
Come here, Jack. Try this bed.
How is it?
Try it.
I feel kind of funny. Maybe I ought to see if somebody's home.
Wouldn't it be funny if...
I'll see if anybody's home. I don't think there is. But if anybody is, I'll see what things are going for.
Well, whatever they ask, offer $10 less. It's always a good idea. Besides, they must be desperate or something.
Hello. You found the bed. That's good.
We were just trying it out.
Yeah. But how much do you want for the bed?
I was thinking maybe 50.
Would you take 40?
I could take 40.
How about the TV?
25?
Would you take 15?
15's okay. I could take 15. Oh, you kids, you want a drink? There's some glasses over there. I'm gonna sit down. Sit down on the sofa.
So what do you want?
How much do you want for the desk?
Name a figure. He looked at them as they sat at the table. There was something about their faces. It was nice or nasty. There was no telling.
I'm gonna turn off the TV.
The record player's going too. Cheap. Make me an offer.
Thank you. You're very nice.
Here. Pick one.
What about this one?
I'm making it out to cash.
Sure.
Hey, why don't you kids dance?
I don't think so.
Go ahead, it's my yard. You can dance if you want to.
I'm too drunk.
You're not drunk.
I am too.
Why don't you dance with me? The people over there, they're watching.
It's okay. It's my place.
Let them watch.
That's right. They think they've seen everything. But they haven't seen this, have they? I hope you like your bed.
You must be desperate or something. Weeks later, the girl said, the guy was about middle-aged. All his things right there in his yard. No lie. We got real pissed and danced in the driveway. He played us these records. He gave us all these crappy records. Can you believe it? She kept talking. She told everyone. There was more to it, and she was trying to get it talked out. After a time, she quit trying.
In the final few lines of the story, I leave it open for interpretation that the young couple just may encounter some of the same difficulties that the fellow did, whose furniture and worldly goods that they're buying off the front lawn. It comes full circle, if you will. I went to the bottom and didn't think I could go any lower down, but I got down there underneath the floorboards someplace, you know. I was brain dead there for a long while, and then I stopped drinking, and then things changed.
Carver published his first short story in the early 60s, but it wasn't until he stopped drinking and escaped the problems of his first marriage that he was able to devote himself to his writing, publishing more than 12 books in his 10 remaining years. Carver was soon acclaimed by many critics as a writer of extraordinary quality, a successor to Steinbeck and Hemingway. He was frequently hailed as the savior of the American short story. Carver felt that he owed much of his success in what he called his second life to the poet Tess Gallagher. Together they moved back to his native Northwest and settled in the small town of Port Angeles, very similar to Yakima where Carver grew up.
Ola's face turned red again.
I've got lots of things to be thankful for, she said. I keep these teeth around to remind me how much I owe Bud. She drank from her root beer. Then she lowered the bottle and said, "You've got pretty teeth, Fran. I noticed right away. These teeth of mine, they came in crooked when I was a kid." With her fingernail, she tapped a couple of her front teeth. She said, "My folks couldn't afford to fix teeth. These teeth of mine came in any which way. My first husband didn't care what I looked like. No, he didn't. He didn't care about anything except where his next drink was coming from. He had one friend only in this world, and that was his bottle." She shook her head. "Then Bud come along and got me out of that mess. After we were together, the first thing Bud said was, 'We are going to have them teeth fixed.' That mold was made right after Bud and I met on the occasion of my second visit to the orthodontist, right before the braces went on." Ola's face stayed red. She looked at the picture on the screen. She drank from her root beer and didn't seem to have anything more to say. "That orthodontist must have been a whiz," Fran said. In my own situation, I lost a tooth in front, and this became the occasion for deciding that I would get my teeth straightened. And at that time, the plaster cast was made. And eventually, I don't know, I never could throw that thing away. It got unpacked and found its way into Ray's bookcase and then eventually into the story. But he never really had any guilt or any compunctions about using things even rather directly. For instance, there's a poem of his which I think when someone reads it and thinks of their own daughter, they might really flinch. But the poem begins, "Daughter, you're a beautiful drunk." That was the hard, cold truth of what he saw and what he suffered from himself in his own drinking, and suffered then again through his daughter's drinking. And he was trying to wake her up in her own life, to bring her to some kind of attention, and he thought he would just use the language that was as straight and hard as the experience.
We had a discussion, almost an argument, about my use of the word earth, which he thought should be ground. And he thought that there was something kind of grandiose about earth. And that all I really meant to say was that brown stuff that's underneath your feet, which is dirt or ground, or and those are the kind of discussions we had. And he made me care enough about every word in that story to really rethink it. And looking at his own manuscripts, they went through the same process. He'd put them in the drawer for a month, and he'd pull them out, and he'd mark them all up, and they looked just like the manuscripts that he'd hand back to me. Question marks, deletions, all in that indecipherable scrawl of his, which was actually a lot like his voice. You know, leaning forward, trying to hear Ray.
When I'm working on a story, nothing in the world is so important as that story, and that's always my favorite story, is the one I'm working on. Some stories, you know you're in touch with something else, and it may only happen on the fourth or fifth draft, but you get this rush. Once in a while, that feeling happens, and you know that you feel this wind buffeting your ears or something. That's a good feeling. That's nice. Yeah. You know that's why we're doing this. Yeah.
He used to call me up in the morning and he'd see if I was awake, and he'd say, "Are you writing? Are you going to write?" Or he'd call me at the end of the day and say, "Did you write?" And I mean, it sounds very unglamorous, and that's, I guess, the point, is that for Ray, it was getting black on white. It was plugging away every day, as he quoted, I think, Chekhov, without hope and without despair. Just going at it like a job. And that was one of the most important things he taught me. You know, that you could keep reasonable hours and live outside of the city, have a wife or a girlfriend, and eat cereal for breakfast, and write great prose. Ray had developed a way of life that facilitated the production of that last great burst of fiction that he produced before he died.
when he moved out here with Tess, whenever it was it 1980?
78 or 80,
78. It was just like having another crack at to do this fishing anyway, like having another crack at his childhood again, because that's oversimplified, but it corresponds to the way he sort of did it. He did it with such pleasure. He did all that fishing on the Columbia River over there, and that all got sort of pushed back into time, and it's like another crack at life again. Come out here and do this. Bonk.
To get to Birch Creek, you go to the end of our street where you hit 16th Avenue. You turn left on 16th and go up the hill past the cemetery and down to Lennox, where there's a Chinese restaurant. From the crossroads there, you can see the airport, and Birch Creek is below the airport. 16th changes to View Road at the crossroads. You follow View for a little way until you come to the bridge. There are orchards on both sides of the road. Sometimes when you go by the orchards, you see pheasants running down the rows, but you can't hunt there because you might get shot by a Greek named Matsos. I guess it is about a 40-minute walk all in all. I was halfway down 16th when a woman in a red car pulled onto the shoulder ahead of me.
Want a ride?
Yeah.
Playing hooky?
Guess so.
She was thin and had little pimples around her mouth, but she was sharp enough. I tried to think of something to say.
I'm going fishing.
Well, I never would have guessed. Where you going, Birch Creek?
Yeah.
I nodded again. I looked at my cap. My uncle had bought it for me in Seattle when he had gone to watch a hockey game. I couldn't think of anything more to say. I looked out the window and sucked my cheeks. You always see yourself getting picked up by this woman. You know you'll fall for each other and that she'll take you home with her and let you screw her all over the house. I began to get a boner thinking about it. I moved the cap over my lap and closed my eyes and tried to think about baseball.
I keep saying that one of these days I'll take up fishing. They say it's very relaxing.
I wanted to say, "Are you real busy? Would you like to start this morning?" But I was afraid to look at her.
Will this help you? I have to turn off here. I'm sorry, I'm kind of in a hurry this morning.
That's okay. This is fine. Goodbye. Thanks. Maybe next summer.
You mean fishing? Yeah, sure thing.
Shit.
She waved with a couple of fingers the way women do. I started walking, going over what I should have said. I could think of a lot of things. What was wrong with me? I cut the air with the fly rod and hollered 2 or 3 times. What I should have done to start things off was ask if we could have lunch together. No one was home at my house. Suddenly we are in my bedroom under the covers. She asks me if she can keep her sweater on, and I say it's okay with me. She keeps her pants on, too. That's all right, I say. I don't mind. A Piper Cub dipped low over my head as it came in for a landing. I was a few feet from the bridge. I could hear the water running. I tried to think where to start. I had fished here for 3 years, ever since we had moved. Dad used to bring George and me in the car and wait for us, smoking, baiting our hooks, tying up new rigs for us if we snagged. We always started at the bridge and moved down, and we always caught a few. Once in a while, at the first of the season, we caught the limit. I rigged up and tried a few casts under the bridge first.
was intensely lucky. He was intensely lucky. He had no right to catch most of the fish he ever caught. We were just talking about that.
And if he did hook one, I don't know how he ever got it in the boat.
Because he got so excited.
Oh.
He would just, you could just see his heart leaping in his chest. Going along, and he caught a big fish on the line, and he played it and played it and played it and played it, and he got the fish right up to the boat. And that's a really precarious time for the fish, because they'll turn on you, and he turned on him and he got off. And you would have thought his grandmother had died and left him out of her will, you know.
He'd be talking about that one for a week.
Yes, he was.
You'd get tired of that story. Oh, God, I don't understand why that got off. I did everything right.
Yeah, there's no reason in the world.
No,
Just
no
God's
reason in the
against
world.
me.
It was very important for him to find this house where he could invite friends, where he could feel a sense of accomplishment. As an alcoholic, a recovering alcoholic, you have to come to terms with your feelings that you don't deserve a lot of things. And it took him quite a long while to believe that he even deserved to have something better than he had started out with, even though he'd worked very, very hard for those things. And he could finally afford somewhere besides a cabin or a trailer or this place he grew up in. It was very bad luck that he didn't get to spend more time in the house. In fact, he was already, spitting up blood when he was looking for the house. I mean, nothing was going to stop him. But he really got to enjoy the view out here.
Chekhov. On the evening of March 22, 1897, he went to dinner in Moscow with his friend and confidant, Alexei Suvorin. This Suvorin was a very rich newspaper and book publisher, a reactionary, a self-made man whose father was a private at the Battle of Borodino. Like Chekhov, he was the grandson of a serf. They had that in common. Each had peasant's blood in his veins. Chekhov was impeccably dressed, as always. He was relaxed, jovial. He had just been seated across the table from Suvorin when suddenly blood began gushing from his mouth.
Ray's closeness to Chekhov had been there from probably the start of his writing. But, of course, at the time in which Ray was writing that story, he did not know that he was dying. We now think, oh, yes, there's a kind of prescience about it, as if he were predicting his own death. Like Chekhov, he tended not to go into the idea of an oncoming death as something that that he should just shut down everything. He really wanted to be as alive as he could. Chekhov, near the end, was reading the train schedules away from the spa where he was dying. And even though Ray knew that things were heavily stacked against him, he really wanted to decide what it was that he needed to do, and he wanted to finish this book of poems. That was the most important thing to him, and we really just threw ourselves into that work.
Dr. Shore pulled on his big mustache and stared at Chekhov. The writer's cheeks were sunken and gray, his complexion waxen, his breath was raspy. Dr. Shore knew the time could be reckoned in minutes. Without a word, without conferring with Olga, he went over to an alcove where there was a telephone on the wall. He read the instructions for using the device. If he activated it by holding his finger on a button and turning a handle on the side of the phone, he could reach the lower regions of the hotel, the kitchen. He picked up the receiver, held it to his ear, and did as the instructions told him. When someone finally answered, Dr. Shore ordered a bottle of the hotel's best champagne. "How many glasses?" he was asked. "3 glasses," the doctor shouted into the mouthpiece. "And hurry, do you hear?" It was one of those rare moments of inspiration that can easily enough be overlooked later on, because the action is so entirely appropriate, it seems inevitable.
Ray was, as long as I knew him, the 11 or so years that I knew him, he was aware of his mortality in this way, that he knew that this was a great time in his life, and he knew it was so exquisite he didn't want it to end. And yet, as a realist, having been through the life he had been through up to those days, he knew it would end. And he was aware of his mortality in terms of the fun stopping, of the pleasure stopping, of his great work having to cease. But he wasn't really much thinking of it in philosophical terms. Ray was not an overtly philosophical man. He was a literalist. He dealt in facts. I mean, he was quite smart. He was not one to transcend the moment. I think he thought he might miss something if he did.
He said, we really need to do something to pull ourselves out of this. He said, let's get married. And I said, that's a great idea. I said, let's do it. And we said, we'll go to Reno. We'll fly down to Reno, and we'll get married, and we'll go gambling. And so that's what we did. Got the tickets, and we bought the rings here. We had to send away for his. They didn't have the right size. And then we took a plane down there and spent 3 days gambling. We got married in a sort of a high, tacky way, Ray called it, in this, it's called Little Heart of Reno chapel right across from the courthouse. And in fact, somebody took a Polaroid of us after the wedding. We went gambling, and I seemed to have incredible luck. And the day we were getting ready to leave, Ray had all these flowers, and I said to him, listen, park all that and come down with me. I want you to see this. He said, I'll wait for you. I don't want to miss this bus now. He said, you've only got about 10 minutes. So I went to the wheel, and I put the money all down on number 24, and it came around, and what do you know? It was 24. And I was running across the casino and out into the sun. I said to Ray, I said, hey, forget that bus. I said, we're taking a taxi. And he just couldn't believe it. He was so happy. It was really far too soon for him to be looking straight at his own death. But one day we were at the Sky House, and we were sitting out on the deck, and he said to me, he said, well, whatever happens now, babe, he said, we're out there in history, babe. We're out there in history. So he really had the sense that he had accomplished something, and that he had been able to see that accomplishment brought together.
You don't remember friends. You don't have in your repository of experience, at least I don't, single things which contain all of some loved one's self. I mean, I lived those days, and we had those years as friends, and nothing but doing them all over again would be the same. Nothing but having those, days to come would be would be enough. So to try to single out something we did, single out something that we said, doesn't mean, it's fine as an anecdote, but it doesn't mean to be truthful. The truth was just all those years, all those days. That's the only truth there was.
Did you miss him?
Yeah, a lot. I don't think salmon fishing will ever be the same without Ray Carver. I don't think it'll, I don't think it could be. But, yeah.
I mentioned steelhead in here, and the steelhead is a trout that goes to the ocean into salt water. It's a steelhead. It's coarse. The man who took 38 steelhead out of this little river last winter, his name is Bill Zitter, last name in the directory, told me the river's changed its course dramatically. He would even say radically since he first moved here, he and his wife. It used to flow yonder where those houses are. When salmon crossed that shoal at night, they made a noise like water boiling in a cauldron, a noise like you were scrubbing something on a washboard. It could wake you up from a deep sleep. Now, there's no more salmon run. And he won't fish for steelhead this winter because Mrs. Zitter's eaten up with cancer. He's needed at home. The doctors expect she'll pass away before the new year. Right where you're living, he goes on, that used to be a motorcycle run. They'd come from all over the county to race their bikes. They'd tear up that hill and then go down the other side. But they were just having fun, young guys, not like those gangs today, those bad apples. I wished him luck, shook his hand, and went home to my house, the place they used to race motorcycles. Later, at the table in my room, looking out over the water, I give some thought to just what it is I'm doing here, what it is I'm after in this life. It doesn't seem like much in the end. I remembered what he'd said about the young men and their motorcycles. Those young men who must be old men now, Zitter's age, or else my age, old enough in either case. And for a moment I imagined the roar of the engines as they surge up this hill, the laughter and shouting as they spill, swear, get up, shake themselves off, and walk their bikes to the top, where they slap each other on the back and reach in the burlap bag for a beer. Now and then one of them gunning it for all it's worth, forcing his way to the top, and then going lickety-split down the other side, disappearing in a roar, in a cloud of dust. Right outside my window is where all this happened. We vanish soon enough, eaten up.